And welcome everybody this morning. My name is Steve Adelberg, and I am the Educational Outreach Associate for the JCRC, Jewish Community Relations Council. And I'm just finishing my second week on the job. But it feels great. This is my first presentation in this role, and I'm very excited. But we're going to cover basically learning about Jewish resources in the community, addressing incidents, understanding guidelines, public school and government guidelines, dealing with discriminating or threatening behaviors, and that'll be Andrew's presentation. Also educating your child about those types of possibilities. Promoting a positive Jewish influence and identity in the home, and of course Avi will do that. And then while we're presenting this morning, if you have questions, please feel free to ask. And each speaker will, preface their remarks by their preference, of course. And then at the end of our presentations, we'll open up the floor for other questions as well. Okay. So to begin, the Jewish community in Northern Virginia, as many of you know, is a very different animal than most Jewish communities along the East Coast. According to a 2003 study, we have 67,000 Jews spread across our region. Our schools do not close on Jewish holidays, high holidays included, but that does not diminish our religious rights and traditions, which we feel must be respected. This program, Proud to be Jewish in the Public Schools, whose name may change in the future, but for right now, has been presented over the last several years in Maryland, in Tidewater area of Virginia, and most recently in Loudoun County at Synagogue in Loudoun County. So the history of this program and the need in the Jewish community for programs like this is well established. Oops. To set the stage for Virginia, Virginia was named, a little history, best state for public school education in the United States recently, as recently as 2 years ago. In 2009 and 2010, the anti-bullying laws in this state were updated, requiring reporting, safeguarding teachers who report, requiring character education courses, and also incorporating penalties for schools and school systems that violate the code. Bully Police USA, which is a website on your web links page, which is the next to the last page in your packet, has rated Virginia an A++ in that category as far as accommodating diversity in the schools. Character education classes, I know in my experience in Fairfax, and anti-hate pledges, which are part of that training, have been incorporated into many schools' programs. The Jewish community has established educator symposiums, in other words, educating public school teachers, and we represent members of the Jewish community, families in the Jewish community, when conflicts arise and act as liaisons. Local synagogues certainly act as advocates. Rabbis and presidents of boards have acted as liaisons and advocates for Jewish families in the public schools. And of course, we have annually at JCRC, we sponsor the Holocaust education, and that's marked by the annual community-wide Holocaust observance, which this year will take place at the JCC on Little River Turnpike on April 7th from 5 to 8:30 p.m. Since we're talking about schools, we thought we'd start with a pop quiz. All right? Scenario time. Your school is putting on a nativity play to celebrate this winter season. Is this permissible? And what do you do? Response time. Then if it's not permissible, what do you do? All right, well, you're right. The answer is no. It is not permissible. And it is incumbent upon the schools, not only sensitivity-wise, but board-wise and guideline-wise, to recognize holidays, but not to celebrate religious holidays. A nativity play, of course, would represent not only insensitivity, but it would lack a fair balance even between religions that may be represented in a particular school, or even if those religions are not represented in that particular school. Musical programs, however, and many of you will be attending musical programs for after the Thanksgiving holidays in your schools, may include religious songs. However, the school should be striking a balance in religious songs, not songs about Christmas around the world, which had been, and most schools are have adjusted to that. So there's a balance between other religious traditions and secular impartiality. And schools should try, public schools should try to achieve that balance. Just a personal experience. I started as an administrator in Fairfax County in what was then called the Area 1 area of Fairfax, Mount Vernon area at Washington Mill Elementary School. And that was in 1989. And when I came into the school, there had been a tradition in the school, and this was not unusual, where Christmas trees and ornaments and other Christmas icons were in the lobby every year. And I had seen it as a teacher when I went into schools prior to becoming an administrator. And when the PTA board heard, well, they were part of the principal choosing process, if you've been on that, in that process, but when they realized that I had been chosen principal and appointed, the Christmas tree was one of the first things to leave the building. And I did not say a word, but there was a sensitivity on the part of the PTA that, a Jewish principal was coming in, and the community knew that, and that, things were going to change as far as impartiality with regard to, and the school was changing diversely as well. And that area of the county is very diverse. At that point in time, the diversity was represented by African Americans in our community. But since then, the Hispanic population has grown, and other religions and people of other faiths have also come into that area. So it was a change that was necessary, and it was a change that I certainly didn't initiate personally, but my appointment there helped. Pop quiz question number 2. A group of high school students wants to meet during lunchtime for Bible study. Is this permissible? Yes. Okay, and it is permissible. And with caveats. And the caveats are that according to the Equal Access Act, and this is a federal law of 1984, the clubs or the gatherings have to follow certain guidelines. And these apply to non-curricular clubs across the board, whether they're religiously oriented or not. They all have to be non-discriminatory. So they have to be open to students of all faith. They have to be student-initiated and run, and students have to apply for a space, whether it be a place in the corner of the cafeteria or a room in the school if they have that available. They have to apply to the administration for a space. It's a local controlled event, which means that it's a school by school request by students. Teachers can monitor these gatherings, but they may not participate in these gatherings. Outsiders may not direct, control, or regularly attend such gatherings. And they could be after school, or they could be during lunchtime, but they cannot conflict with the instruction, the main thing of the school, which is curriculum and instruction. And then finally, the meetings must be announced to the whole student body so that everybody has the opportunity to attend. So a little bit more about equal access. So the bottom line on, and especially in high schools, because, and I'll touch on this in a little bit, but in high schools, the bottom line is student expression. And Justice Abe Fortas, who was a Jewish Supreme Court justice appointed by President Johnson in the 60s, said that, in one of his opinions, Tinker versus Des Moines, Iowa School District, said that it can hardly be argued that either students or teachers shed their constitutional rights to freedom of speech or expression at the schoolhouse gate. This has been the unmistakable holding of this court for almost 50 years. And then subsequent opinions, of course, have reinforced that. First Amendment rights for students and teachers and administrators do not leave or are not left behind when you go into school. They must conform to the guidelines of the school board and the rules of student conduct in the school, but they must be respected in the school. So there are pragmatic differences between high school students' rights and, of course, middle school and elementary school students' rights. Their expressions differ just pragmatically by their cognitive levels. However, student expression and teachers and administrators must take note and respect student expression at any level in the public schools and accommodate that expression, whether it's religious or political or whatever. Students have the right to express themselves in a respectful way, as long as it's within the guidelines of the school. Not disrupting instruction and equal access for all religious groups. Pop question number 3. For a homework assignment, students are required to illustrate their winter break activities. Debbie draws a picture of her family lighting the menorah. The teacher posts the classwork on a bulletin board. Should she include Debbie's picture as well as those of her classmates who drew their families at Mass? Of course, of course. And again, it is incumbent upon her to do so. It's not a question. Student work is protected by freedom of speech, First Amendment rights, graduated level of protection across K through 12 in the public schools, and especially if the work fits the assignment. In other words, if the student expression was not, was completely off base as far as addressing what the assignment was, there may be some type of question or discussion ensuing. But especially if the expression, the artwork or the poetry, whatever it is a response to an assignment, the teacher has, there's no question about its display. And then, of course, the response of the teacher should be non-discriminatory. In your packet, there are a number of web links that we've included, and among them are federal, state, and local school board policies. I included Falls Church, I included Fairfax County, and I included Arlington, which I think for the most part for this area are the school systems that parents would be most likely to have children in the schools. But you can look if your child attends a school in another area of Northern Virginia. There are guidelines that every school board has adopted with regard to non-discrimination, with regard to bullying, and those are school board level objectives that are published online by every school board. Okay, so government guidelines share things in common. They prohibit teaching religion, but teaching about religion, and the high schools in Fairfax County, I know, have courses of teaching about different religions, are common. Freedom of speech, of course, and First Amendment rights are incorporated in those guidelines. Access to school facilities are incorporated in those guidelines. Ceremonies and observances are incorporated. Excused absences and class attendance are also in those guidelines, and every county has their different attendance regulations. Anti-harassment is included, teaching of controversial topics, and curriculum. So we're talking about U.S. Department of Ed guidelines, the Virginia State guidelines, and then the ones I've just mentioned, Fairfax, Falls Church, and Arlington, Virginia. So best approaches for your child in the public school. Being proactive is always necessary. And when your child is old enough to know that there are differences between students in the school, either ethnically or religiously, creating with the child and with your whole family a plan to make your child feel safe emotionally, socially, in the school that he or she is attending is always a great idea. And I think Andrew and Avi will talk a little bit more about that. Penalties for offenders in the public schools. When incidents do occur, the result of, and the way the principal deals with it, or the way the other administrators in the school system deal with it, is not always in your control, and that's something to realize and recognize. That certainly your input is welcome and necessary, but that the final consequences and penalties for incidents are not necessarily always in your control, and maybe not visible to you because of the confidentiality of such actions. One of the keynotes when interacting with the public school system is collaborate, don't aggravate. And to try to, ask questions, but not in an intimidating or accusatory way. And that the kind of cooperation that you want from the school system when things do occur can much better come from a little bit of honey rather than a little bit of salt. Cultivate positive outcomes, example, taking advantage of teachable moments. A lot of, and the example of the Christmas tree at my first school, we had this, that was followed by discussions about honoring diversity and religious diversity. And those kinds of moments in a school community or in a school system are valuable. And they will impact not only your situation and your interaction with the public schools, but they will also impact future interactions for other families and other students in either the same school or in the school system. It's very important to build solid relationships, especially since most of you, your children, for the most part, will be in those schools for 6 or at most 6 years in elementary school, and then followed in middle school and high school by a good number of years. Building relationships with the administration, with the teachers of that school is really important, and will serve you and your children well throughout. and working up the chain of command is very important. Starting with the teacher or the coach or the club activity sponsor, the people who are supervising the children, the students, when an incident may have occurred, or the people who saw it occur. It's always best to start with those people. Don't call the principal or the superintendent or your school board member first. Begin at the beginning. And I think that's where to go. If you don't get the kind of response starting at that point, then follow the chain of command. But I think the people who are working with your children appreciate getting that communication, and for the most part, they will respond to that feedback, and they will work with you in those situations. So to summarize, we need to set realistic expectations and identify concrete outcomes for holiday. For holiday conflicts, students must not be penalized for religious observance. And most boards and schools have outlines for excused absences for those religious observance. And I think Rabbi Schwartzman is going to talk about that, address that issue in the high schools after our panel today. Familiarize yourself with your school district's policies. So when you know the policies and you're raising an issue of something that may happen, you are familiar with that policy. Religious expression, of course, those guidelines are covered in the school board's guidelines and objectives. Equal access is the rule of thumb for religious groups. Proselytizing is not part of those guidelines. Recognizing holidays but not celebrating those holidays is also part of those guidelines. And then incidents, a safety plan for your child, and Andrew's going to follow immediately after this slide. Making an incident or an issue or a concern or a problem a teachable moment for the people that are involved in the school system as well would be appreciated. Penalties for offenders, again, not necessarily in your control or in your realm of knowledge, and collaborating but not aggravating is the best way to go about it. So the next slide starts with Andrew McGahan, who is the director of JESA. And Andrew?
Thank you. I'm Andrew McGahan. I am the clinical director at the Northern Virginia office of JESA, the Jewish Social Service Agency. I see some familiar faces. I have been here probably for about the last 5 years, off and on. We come every year to work with the 5th graders in reference to the bullying dynamic itself. We're very active in the Jewish community. We're at all the synagogues doing programming around this. Wednesday night, we're at Bethel. So today, I'm going to try and cover a couple of different things. I'm more than happy to take questions as we go or at the end. As Stephen has noted, when incidents do happen, the most primary thing that you're obviously going to be looking at is your change in the child's behavior. You guys know your kids obviously the best, and so obviously when you are seeing things that are different, it's when you start asking questions, whether it be to your child, to the school, and I will agree 100% with Stephen in terms of if there is an incident, where you come in and starting to work with the school is at where it started at the lowest levels, and then working yourself up that chain of command. Again, is understand the situation. When we talk about bullying, and I'm going to cover bits and pieces around bullying, the topic is huge. Generally speaking, the presentation we do with parents is about 2 hours long. Fairfax County has been very aggressive themselves in trying to change what their policies are around bullying. They've become very much more concrete, which is good. They went through a process over the last 2 years or so. I was involved in that in a couple of different areas. The Fairfax County Partnership for Youth, which is a nonprofit organization that works with Fairfax County Public Schools, they too have put together a big program on how to address bullying, whether it be within the context of a school, of a community center, or some other entity, a sports team, and actually they have a big launch coming, I think it's Tuesday night. That being that the bullying dynamic has taken, obviously front page notice with the deaths, the suicides, and some of the other tragic things that happen in relation to it, not to mention the long-term effects that go along with it. Understanding the situation, whether it be a conflict, whether it be discrimination, whether it be bullying, it's making sure that you understand exactly what happened. I encourage parents, I encourage teachers and staff all the time to document, to write things down, to hold on to emails that have been sent to you, to your child. All of these things will be used by the school or by the entity to define what type of interaction it was, whether or not it was bullying. The schools have become very specific in how they categorize it, and documentation is part of that process. So making sure that you're keeping track of the specific information, where it happened, when it happened, who was involved. Obviously, the understanding of resources, knowing your school teachers, knowing the guidance counselors, the school social workers, the school nurse, the librarian. The more people you know, the more you're involved with the school, the more resources you have. And then obviously involving outside resources when necessary, whether it be the JCRC, PJLL, JESA, personal therapists, whatever the case may be, other counselors, knowing who your resources are and making sure that you have the ability to tap into that as well. The other aspect, and this comes up a lot, whether it be I'm working with a school staff or a parent community, is the ability to communicate positively and collaborate with the school. What we have seen a lot is that parents, something has happened, the call goes into the school, it's a very aggressive call, something's happening to my child. Of course, we're worried, we're upset. In doing so, the school then automatically takes a very defensive stance, and then the communication becomes harder and harder and harder. I would encourage always trying to go about that first phone call, that first interaction, in one of collaboration, that you're going to be working on this together to address the issue. We know when our kids, or if we've been accused of something, our reaction is going to be one of defensiveness. So it's protecting your child in the sense that you're going in and we're going to go about this collaboratively. And then also knowing when the child will need additional supports, whether it be social skills, some other sports programming, counseling, variety of other resources out there. So in the context of discrimination, unfortunately, we do live in a society where it does still exist. And we see it a lot, and I see it a lot, particularly with some of the children I work with, in more of the subtle discrimination, not that overt, in your face, subtle comments, subtle sarcasm, things said that, doing that, oh, wow, that was kind of a Jewish thing to do, or you're being kind of Jewish on that. Those kinds of comments. And kids will miss it often, and they don't realize that they're actually being discriminated against at first. So these things can be obviously a one-time incident or ongoing. If they're ongoing, they will start to fall more into that category of bullying. We are working right now with a school, whereas there were comments made, it wasn't in reference to Jewish, but there were subtle comments being made to a particular child about their faith, of a different faith, Islam. And it had become, the family actually started tracking it and keeping a little log at home as to all the little comments that were made. And there were about 15 comments made over the course of a month or so. And these are just things said offhandedly, kind of backhanded comments, but they add up, obviously, and they're going to have an effect on the child, their self-esteem, and their self-identity. Discrimination can be verbal, physical, can be graffiti, can be obviously very subtle, and it can be also based in cyber and technology. Cyberbullying has probably become, in a lot of ways, the most preferred manner, particularly with the high school students in particular, with their access to Facebook, Instagram, all the other stuff out there. How many of you have high school students? How many of those high school students are on the computer? Right. Just saying. Do you know how much time a high school student should be on the computer? Take a guess. Give me a guess. Per day. What's healthy? 2 to 3 hours. Average time most high schoolers are actually on computers. 7 hours. So for all you parents of high school students, it's something actually, and that plays out well also in elementary school, the same notion, and actually kids in elementary school really should be limited to their access to screen time and computer time. How many have elementary school age kids? Okay. The best amount of time for an elementary school age child is about an hour to an hour and a half. Most elementary school kids are on the computer about how long? About 3 to 4 hours a day. Yep. So it's something to be aware of. The reason technology is great, you're not, I'm not going to argue it. I have a PS3. I bought a new video game yesterday. I get it. That being said, if we're not watching how much our kids are experiencing these things, the influence that the video games, that the different shows, that the different online interactions going on, we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second. So in understanding discrimination itself, there can be genuine curiosity, but then there can also be genuine discrimination. So there's often inquisitiveness. I was raised actually myself very strict Catholic and did not have a very good understanding of the Jewish culture until I got into college and met more people of the Jewish faith. Genuine questions can be asked by other students versus something that is vindictive, a comment or a question meant to bring about embarrassment, shame, or humiliation, or an unwanted attention, which is another thing. Often kids who are very private, whether they be Christian, Jewish, Islam, are private about their identity and their religious faith, and they don't necessarily want that blasted out there. So making comments to other people in front of kids about someone's religious background can also be seen as discrimination if one is trying to safeguard themselves and keep those things private. Sometimes it's very important, though. I've worked with a lot of kids that feel, and we can talk a little bit about this, particularly around boys and how boys interact, that kids feel that there are jokes made at times and they don't take offense to it. Us men have a tendency that when we bond, we like to tease and make fun of one another. So the interaction of the child and the perception of the child will play a role into how they're identifying whether or not they're being hassled, harassed, shamed. But often people are just asking genuine questions about one's background, one's faith, to gain better understanding. And it's very important to understand and differentiate between the two. So when we talk about bullying, bullying now has a very, very specific definition. Most of the schools in Virginia, Fairfax County, Arlington County, Alexandria City have shifted to the U.S. Department of Education's definition of bullying, which means that it has to be ongoing, it has to be continuous, and this again goes back to why you want to document what is happening. I tell teachers all the time to document what's happening. I tell school administrative staff to document what's happening. And it works both ways. If a parent calls in and says, my child is being bullied, and the teacher's been aware of a conflict and has written down what's going on, and maybe this conflict has only happened once or twice, the response from the school can be, well, it's not really a bullying dynamic. There is a serious conflict, but it's not bullying. And the schools are going to be very specific now into how they categorize it in terms of whether or not it's considered bullying. It has to be intentional, and that intent is that there is an intent to cause harm. It's being done on purpose. We want somebody to feel bad. We want someone to feel humiliated, shamed, embarrassed in front of a group. So there has to be that intent behind it. And then the last thing would be that there has to be an obvious sign of an imbalance of power. Power is defined in many different areas. The kids are very good at pointing out whether it be social power and popularity. It can be cyber power, and one has access to computers and has access to technology. Other kids don't. We often equate financial status to power. And then, of course, there's the classic, physical power, and we're pushing people down. Yes, ma'am?
But if it's peer-peer, where there's no power imbalance, it's not bullying?
There will probably be a power. No, there will probably be a power imbalance if it's going to be defined within the context of bullying. So, for example, if you have two peers, the kids are the same age, same grade, same class, whatever, one could be popularity, and one kid has a lot more popularity than the other, and that power has been used to do an ongoing and intentional, we're getting our henchmen, our hench people is what I've been told by the kids. I have to be more politically correct. The girls didn't like henchmen, so hench people, their gang, their posse is the one that they like to use too.
The other type of minions.
The other type of minions, there you go. But yes, there's always, when it's going to be defined within the context of bullying, the school will be able, the counselor, you as a parent, even the child will be able to identify where there's been that imbalance in power, okay? A conflict is usually argument, single, maybe a couple times. It's not something that's ongoing. You will definitely have the aspect that will be missing is that imbalance of power. And power does not also, it can also be included within the context of intelligence. I have worked with kids, and not just intelligence, but the manner of quick thinking. And I have worked with kids who are literally, 4'11", they're in 5th grade, they're tiny, and they've been accused of being a bullier. And they are very smart, and they know how to find the weakness of another child. And I worked with a boy who was in 6th grade, played football, but he was complaining to his parents about being bullied, and the dad didn't want to believe him. You're a big guy, who was going to pick on you? And it happened to be one of the smallest kids in the school, but had gotten some information about him, was very smart at how he was putting that information out there, what he was saying to the boy, where he was saying it in front of others in order to get a reaction. And the child was totally being bullied. So size is not the only thing, obviously. Also, peer conflicts can be unintentional. And a comment can be made about something, whether it be about the Jewish faith, the Catholic faith, the Muslim faith. And it can be a question. It can be something said not meant to cause harm, and someone takes offense to it, which is fine. And it's working through that conflict and understanding and differentiating between the concept of bullying and the concept of a peer conflict. Any questions? Yes, ma'am. If it is that, and if it's cyber related and you're going to involve the police, you are going to need a record. And actually with cyberbullying, there is a law. I don't have the law in this slide, in this PowerPoint presentation, but Fairfax County uses a law that you're not allowed to use computers or technology to purposely harass, stalk, blah, 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 blah. It comes with up to 12 months in jail and $2,500 fine, to which the parents of the child of the aggressor is actually the one who will be held accountable in terms of the financial status. Kids are rarely sent to jail, just so you know, but but they are put on probation, supervised, unsupervised. There's community service requirements. There's a variety of things. And when addressing cyberbullying, often the schools have a hard time in tracking it. And often parents feel as if we do need to bring the police in. I would encourage, if your child has ever been a victim of it, everyone knows how to do a snapshot of the computer screen, I hope. You hit your print screen, you cut and paste it, you print it. Keep copies of everything, because it will be needed if you are actually going to prove that your child is being bullied in the school, and or the authorities need to get involved.
And Andrew, I'd also like to add from a JCRC perspective, we have dealt with incidents where there's been electronic correspondence outside the schools, but it's involving classmates within the school, and the schools still have been willing to get involved and engaged because they do understand that that's impacting their school environment. So just because it's happening off campus doesn't mean that the schools don't want to get involved to address that.
Agreed. And when we go into schools and do programs with the school staff, the administration, and the teachers, most of the teachers and the staff will acknowledge that we will almost always take an active role in dealing with it, because the context of that dynamic are going to play out in our school hallways. So even if it happens at home in the neighborhood and it's a repetitive thing, and letting the school know that this is going on and getting them, chances are it's happening at school as well. Okay? It happens within the context of the schools. It happens obviously where there are not adults, where there's not the adult supervision, the bathrooms, the playgrounds, the libraries, where the lines of sight are very hard. The school bus, has become a very popular place, so to speak, in terms of harassment, and the bus stop. So here I have listed out, generally speaking, the different types of bullying that we discuss. The kids always like you'll notice that emotional is not on there, and the kids will always say emotional bullying. I do not include that because all bullying is emotional. All bullying has an emotional content to it. So it doesn't matter if you're being excluded. It doesn't matter if someone is attacking your race, or if there's some sort of sexual harassment, which is categorized under the bullying laws and policies within Fairfax County Public Schools for sure, that there's going to be an emotional content to it. And there's going to be feelings hurt and pain and suffering. So I don't usually put that word up there anymore. As I've noted, particularly with the high schoolers, the cyberbullying has become the big venue for this. I don't know how many of you, a lot of you raised your hands with high schoolers. How many of you guys have heard the story about Amanda Todd? Nobody? Couple? All right, I'm surprised because the kids are talking about it a lot. You can search it on YouTube. It is a very difficult video to watch. This is a young lady who, as a freshman in high school, made one mistake where she flashed another bunch of kids on the other end of a cyber interaction going on. The kids took a snapshot of it and began disseminating it. She made one mistake. They followed her from school to school to school to the point that she had to pack up, move to a different city, still found her online. And this is the frustration with the cyberbullying aspect of things. There's anonymity, and you can track people down everywhere. She made this incredible video about her experience of being the victim of bullying. And I'm going to date myself. And NXS has a video, which is actually a playoff of a Bob Dylan video, where they just flip cards throughout the concept of the video, right, and it tells the story. So she does the same thing. She doesn't say a word. There's music playing in the background, but she flips cards to tell her story. And it's a very hard story to watch, and she ends up suffering from cutting and depression and suicide attempt. She put this video out a year ago. Nothing really happened with it. It went viral about a month ago because she actually succeeded in committing suicide. It did not stop, and it went on, and this had been going on for years. So this is the cyber aspect of things. The kids have a really hard time getting away from it. When I work with kids, particularly those who are victims of it, and they're on Facebook and Instagram and some of these other things, I know it's impossible for them to comprehend, but I actually have them shut down their Facebook accounts for a period of time, shut down Instagram, shut down these other things, because this is how the kids find access to them. In terms of educating your child, make sure that they have an understanding of how you feel about the concept of bullying and discrimination. Jewish kids discriminate too. They're the victims of, and they do it. We all do. We're all following that. Understanding and having a discussion with your child of what it means to be a minority. I come from a family background where I was adopted. I was adopted into a white family. I went to a predominantly white school. As a matter of fact, my first experience was in the Catholic school where there were two African-American students, myself and my sister. I had no idea what it was like or what the concept was to be a minority, and kind of thrown into it, full kit and caboodle. It was a conversation that my parents never had with me. And I encourage you, Judaism is often, as we know, seen as an ethnicity, it's seen as its own culture subset, and having a discussion with your kids as to what it means to be a minority, to be different from others, is probably one of the most important conversations that you can have with your kids so they have an understanding of what it means to be looked at differently. This goes back to some of the things that Stephen was saying in terms of the seeking the support, reporting the incident, document the incident, document, even if it's discrimination, document. The school needs to know about it, even if it's not an ongoing thing. Make sure you have the information as to who was involved, what happened. Again, going back to being the aggressive versus assertive. Being aggressive will get you nowhere in the school system. They will shut you down. They will shut you out. As a parent, you have the right to know what's happening to your child. When another child has been tagged as a bullier and there is consequences being handed out, when there is a policy being put into place, you do not have the right to know what is going on with that other child. And I know it's very frustrating. I always tell parents, if the behavior stops, you know that the school is doing their job. But they are not going to tell you, nor do you have the right to know that information. It's private information. And then again, having the safety plan. You don't necessarily have the right to insist upon it. He is the coach. He's going to run the team the way he sees fit. As a parent, I would encourage you to be speaking with the coach and letting him know as to what you would hope would come out of that, that this is really a serious insult. And I would really hope that you would speak to this child specifically in addition to doing something. You can't make it. Was it at is it a youth league or is it a school base? Yeah, and that's the difference. If it was a school base, I would say you'd need to inform the school, because the school then has to play a role in terms of ensuring that if it's a youth league, and the youth leagues are very different. In addition to, each sport is managed very differently. I don't know how many of you all have kids who play football. Football coaches are very different from basketball coaches, from baseball coaches. Football coaches are very different in general. There's a lot of yelling. There's a lot of screaming. They actually come across as bullies themselves. It's kind of the culture of the sport. So that's another nuance in terms of working within the context of the youth sports leagues.
And Angela, if I could again amplify, so how we've addressed that a little bit at JCRC as well. It may have been beneficial for the coach to address specifically the person, but what we try to ask for at JCRC when incidents happen and parents are in agreement is that we want to make it a teachable moment. We actually think that the idea of addressing the environment in the school is a better approach to address not just what happened there, but to create a better ongoing climate. ADL handles these issues nationwide as well. They created a program called World of Difference that specifically is doing that is taking students and teaching them to be mediators, because what we don't want is to see all the people around bearing silent witness. The goal is to have the other students able to and understanding their role in stopping the bullying.
Well, on that fact, the fact that in your situation that the other kids went after the aggressor in that situation, it's really what we want to play out. When I go into schools, we work with all the kids, but we talk a lot about the power of the witness. 85% of kids are neither bullied nor bullies themselves. Most kids are witnesses to this. I never use the word bystander, even though it's used all the time. Bystander and shows that, kind of alludes to standing by, whereas witnesses, we talk with the kids on reporting it and being an active participant, that you have power. Sure. That goes right back to why we're here today in terms of talking to your children about the Jewish identity and building that identity within. Yes. Safety plan would be sitting down with your kids and talking to them. If you see something happen, who would you feel safe talking to let know that that's happened? Would it be us? Do you have a favorite teacher at school? Do you like the school counselor? Do you like the school nurse? If you're a victim, if you feel as if you've been victimized in some way, what's our plan? Who are you going to tell first? Is it going to be school? Are you going to come home? Are you going to talk to me? Then I will email or contact the school. It's having a couple of set steps, usually up to 3, as to if there's an incident going on, how you're expecting your child to manage that scenario, and then your role in that as well. These next couple of slides are all in your packet. I want to make sure Avi has enough time, and I'll take more questions at the end around the topic of bullying and discrimination. So we do cover briefly in the packet what to do, the basics, is if you think your child's being bullied, what not to do. There are a lot of do nots, okay? I know as boys, I was always told to fight back physically. Boys are still told it to this day. I don't condone it. Sometimes it actually will end the interaction, but it's just not necessarily going to be the right way to go about it, particularly because on Fairfax County school property, if you're caught in a physical altercation, everybody is getting in trouble, and everyone's being suspended. Now, the aggressor may get more time, more serious consequences, but if your child's physically fighting, they're going to get suspended as well. What to do if you think your child may be bullying others, and if there's targets, there are aggressors, so working with the school with that. And then what to do if your child witnesses bullying. So all these things are laid out in the PowerPoint, and at this point, I turn it over to Mr. Avi.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Avi West. I am the Director of Educational Resources at the Partnership for Jewish Life and Learning, what we've been calling PJLL. So I've been around also for a while, about 35 years, and have worked with most of the schools, nursery, elementary, high schools in the area, along with adult education. And you can get me at the partnership, awest at pjll.org. Rodef folks know how to get in touch with me. So before I go further, I want to note that today is Veterans Day. If there are veterans in the audience, I want to thank you for your service. It is something that makes all of this possible, especially this of the freedoms we enjoy in this country. My father, a proud to be Jewish kind of guy, is 91 years old, happens to be the president of his shul in West Palm Beach, and today, at this very moment, is in some park with his hat and his friends from the Jewish War Veterans group. And it fills me with pride, and it is a very big part of his identity and how he sees the world. And in that sentence that I just said, thank you for your service, there are two reasons that I bring it up this morning. Thank you. The recognition of good, hakarat hatov, is a big Jewish value. And having holidays are great times to remember to say thank you to people, things, entities that you forget, you take for granted. Service, avodah, is one of the three pillars of Jewish life. Torah, learning, avodah, service, and gemilut chasadim, deeds of loving kindness. So it's important to frame it that way. Okay, time out. What did I just do? This was a programmed beginning, right? And a sort of, not just off the cuff. Yep. Taught a lesson. What kind of lesson? Is it just a Jewish lesson? No. Right? Universal and particular. What I tried to do was model, for the moment, the ability to take our multiple identities and show that if you don't silo them, if you don't artificially write yourself in a corner, they can be merged. And I do this for a specific reason. And one of the main things I'm speaking about, but all of us are really seen as the overall goal, is positive Jewish identity. And it was mentioned here. If someone owns their identity and understands it and all its components and see it as positive, they will have the inner strength and the abilities and the resilience to deal with certain things as well. Does that help? Yes. Noah. Okay. So, yeah, that's if it works. Also, it's good. That's fine. It's green. Hello? Hello? That's fine. It was on? Oh, very good. So, one of the things that we understand is that all of us have multiple identities. For instance, how many of you are children? Yes. And I don't mean that you are loving your inner child, right? You are blessed with parents, you have that role, you are children. How many of you are parents? Yeah. How many of you have titles to the work you do, let's say, outside the home? Yeah. How many of you are on sports teams? Clubs, hobbies, volunteer groups? Yeah. Each one of those are components to your identity. And there's nothing wrong with that. That is modern life. That is taking advantage of the freedoms of this country, this community, modern times. And normally, we do a pretty good job juggling. When do we get into problems, stress, anxiety? It's when we either artificially have to prioritize or the juggling doesn't work. That is when stress happens. So, Judaism has two stories that we tell that may point us in the direction which would lead to positive Jewish identity within all the identities. The first is what we can call the Jewish Pledge of Allegiance, which is the Shema. Shema Yisrael. Pay attention, you Israelites, and the word Yisrael means the people who wrestle with big things. Pay attention, you people who wrestle with these big ideas. Adonai Eloheinu, this Lord that we call our God, that Adonai is Echad. That there's a oneness that we strive to look for. That oneness leads to healthy identities, the merging of all the things. So oneness is good. In fact, right, we'll talk when Rabbi Schwartzman talks about the high holidays. What do we call one of those days? The day of atonement. What's atonement? At one mint. The ability to merge things carefully, right, with some edges perhaps, but that it all can fit together. The second story is the Jewish story of creation. The Jewish story of creation says in Genesis that first there was chaos, and our understanding of creation is taking order out of chaos. What's order out of chaos? Water. The earth was unformed and void, and water was here and there and everywhere. And then there was a firmament, and water had its boundaries. Distinctiveness, boundaries, that's the Jewish story. All of these two themes can be used when we're talking about our identities. We are trying to move towards a oneness, not exclusive oneness, a cooperative oneness where all the things that we want for ourselves can exist together. Oneness means negotiating, oneness means discussing, alternating, right? Finding compromises. You hear Washington, right? But that is the name of the game, and it is tough. So for our purposes today, we're going to look at some of the conflicts a bit between the particular and the universal, the ethnic, religious, the Jewish, and 21st century Americans in Washington, D.C., because that's really the anchor identity. One thing I would not take issue with, Andrew, but I think what I find is that many of our kids are blindsided by some of the bullying and other issues because they unlike other generations, perhaps don't see themselves as different, ostensibly, right? Or they're not conscious of even having religious holidays. They may be different holidays, but that doesn't make them different because everybody has the holidays. And when something hits them, specifically as Jews, it's confusing. They don't know where it comes from, and that's part of the overall issue. So we as parents and teachers are trying to help our families learn strategies that bring some unity to their variety of personal identities. And while we want to anchor their identity in the particular, which is Hamish, which is the home, the family, deep roots in history perhaps, or choosing to be a part of the people as Jews by choice have done, that is an important anchor. For instance, look at this place this morning. This is a mall. It happens to be a Jewish ethnic mall. But it's a mall where you see all sorts of goods and services. By the way, I'm not in competition with the gift shop. This is just my tchotchke table for props. But you see people of different ages, intergenerational activities, all sorts of things. So your ethnic, religious, particular identity could be a great source of strength, but it needs to be seen as value added to the general identity as well, and not have them separate. So let's start with some questions for you. What is it, and this is not rhetorical, what is it about our particular identity that we value and care to transmit to the next generation? What is it about that particular identity that we're enthused with or that's worth being assertive to transmit? Yep.
The idea of preparing the world, that service is a very strong part of the tradition.
Great. The one aspect is we have a mission-driven life. Don't let the self-help book steal that phrase or any other group. It's good for many groups to have a mission-driven life. The two words mostly that we've used are tikkun olam. We are partners with God in creation, and the way you articulate that is through service, is through activity for humanity, but also from your family to community and outward. That's a big deal. That's an ethic to stand up for. Anything else? Yep.
I always tell my children how when they're talking about Christmas at school, or sometimes they're having some issues related to that, and they might feel like they're left out. And I tell them how wonderful Judaism is. You know, it's such amazing. Like we go by the seasons, and Judaism is a religion of fun. You know, it's so wonderful, and I always tell them how wonderful it is. Like, you know, we have Sukkot, we have all our holidays are so much fun and so beautiful. So I try to emphasize the happiness and beauty of our holidays.
Great. So if we do not have to put our eggs in one basket, just the December dilemma, we indeed can talk about our holiday cycle as a cycle of remembering important ideas attached to good seasons which stimulate those ideas. For instance, harvests, those are important, and that those holidays have a serious aspect and a fun aspect. They're pretty well developed and sophisticated. They're not just little cut and paste games that we used to play in early childhood. They are now motivations for thinking big thoughts about ideas. Passover, freedom from slavery, right? Hanukkah, the ability to, and there's an article here, please come to the smorgasbord afterwards, becoming a Maccabee, right? What does it mean, right? In terms of just saying no, in terms of being bullied, or just saying no in terms of the real story of Hanukkah, which is not about oil, it's about the fight of different identities, Hellenism or old-time Judaism. And of course, as we look around the room today, I'm not sure who really won, right? But yes, the holiday cycle. All right, I will bow to the local resource because Cantor Allen is right on top of these kinds of things. But let me just frame it by saying that educating the community can't be in the old mold of just throwing out Jewish definitions that aren't going to make sense outside of our in-speak, right? So the trick to finding material, at least on the web, like at certain websites, especially the Jews by Choice websites, which have the right language, is one of finding the mix of particularism and universality that makes the holiday make sense or the ritual make sense and demystifies it from simply theology into practical mission or philosophy. Alan, let me just...
The easiest place to find resources is to speak with your synagogue's educational director. Well, I'm telling you where you can look. There's not one good national place. If you're part of the Reform movement, the URJ website has parent resources listed on it for every single holiday. That's an easy place to go. I know that we at Rodef post on our school website packets for parents for just what you're talking about. So when it comes up to Hanukkah, we'll put out a Hanukkah packet for parents to use as a resource, or for Passover, or for the High Holy Days. So we actually provide those materials.
And there is I did prepare a little websites for Judaic background information, so you can find all sorts of goods, just, browse. But I will take the challenge as I guess a local resource. If you can't find it, you want it, I'm really willing to work within the partnership to create something that may be helpful that we could then post through the Federation, shalomdc.org, et cetera, and get it around. I agree, but let me caution, because this is always the case, especially in America, where it's advertising and consumerism that creates the language level, which is usually lower than it needs to be. We have, over the last 60 years in Jewish education, done too much to trivialize, make, simplistic. Pedagogy comes from the word, peds, which are kids. We've pediatricked Judaism. It is a sophisticated, important worldview religion that does go beyond food. Why? Because the food we love is actually symbols. So if we talk about the food, those are anchors, just like all of these things, these are anchors for something else. And always tie the symbolism to the food, which really helps. Your early childhood program here at Rodef Shalom does an amazing job with that approach, the project approach, where something is called a stimulation or provocation, and then kids have to create a hypothesis. You don't spoon feed it, you try to, which is really the word education, draw it out, create a hypothesis, then the learners of different groups own it, and you can take them further. Exactly, yeah. So another handout is about Hakarat HaTov, the recognition of good in one's life, Thanksgiving, and the holiday of Thanksgiving, including an activity that could be done around your table. And let me just hold with questions because we're gonna, I have to finish up and then you can ask all of us questions in a minute. That's the point, these reachable moments, teachable moments, making sure that you do have some of the details and you have this is an amazing community with many resources, both cyber resources as well as warm, loving human beings who work with your kids and can work with your families. So make those attempts and think of the oneness. So for instance, I could sing to you from Sesame Street, some of these things are not like the others. What's not like the others here, just to stimulate? Can you see it? Yeah, okay. Well, then let me give it away, right? For instance, why would I bring this along with, you know, I brought a mezuzah, I brought a Chanukiah. Ah, yes. Right? Again, there is nothing wrong in Jewish law about having your VW minibus, because I am a child of the 60s, to make it a discussion point, right, around your Hanukkah family. But, so why do I have the basketball? What does that have to do with Judaism? All right, so, exactly. So part of the juggling is, it is a part of somebody's skills, identities, and if somebody's doing well, you know, as we used to say, God don't make mistakes. If you got it, flaunt it, do it, right? How do you align it to a set of structures, boundaries, the creation story, so that it's not in conflict, but enhances? One of the solutions we had, and we do this for Jewish Heritage Night, is a handout called How a Mensch Plays Sports. So the idea isn't just it's sports or going to the synagogue. That's what created the Civil War during the times of the Hasmoneans. That's really what happened in Hanukkah. Instead, it becomes a time to discuss what do we get out of sports? How do we play sports Jewishly, meaning Menschlichkeit, the idea of a mensch, which is a person of integrity, right? You will train to win, but you're also going to be trained not just to score, but to make an assist. So there's some great language here, the difference between sportsmanship and gamesmanship. So, yes? Okay, so yeah, we can circulate these. So that's the bottom line. There's also something here about enriching your environment. What can you put up in terms of artwork, tzedakah boxes, multi-sensory things, the spice box. It's not just a stand up, sit down, say the blessing. Each one of these activities become enrichment, multi-sensory, and a cause for discussion. So that's bigadol in the large picture. We can ask questions later.
I'll start with the last one first. Yeah. The school system usually offers multiple opportunities for information regarding TJ and admissions and regs and that type of thing. So they do it, I know personally, being a Gesher and just being a principal in Fairfax, there are a number of opportunities that they offer on different dates at different sites. And we have the luxury of being such a large county where if one site and date and time is not convenient for parents, being, it being a religious issue or whatever, then there are other opportunities for parents to partake of that information. With regard to the Little League, I'll jump to the first one. I think, Andrew, the issues concerning non-school activities are a little bit more difficult to deal with because of the size of the activity and the organization of the activity. As far as sports scheduling is concerned, we certainly would have a problem, or some people may have problems playing on Shabbat, whether it be Friday evening or Saturday day. And when a student gets into that activity, becomes part of that activity, the schedules are there to see. So it becomes either an excused absence, an understandable absence issue, or a choice on the part of the family and the child to participate in that activity that may conflict with their religious beliefs. And then as far as the PTA issue, and the PTA was, what activity was that?
Movie night?
Okay.
Oh. And they basically like, we're a multicultural society.
Right, and
it's not school's fault.
and you're a member of the PTA. I think that's a teachable moment. I really do. That, if you have access to a PTA's annual schedule, or if it creeps up on you, and we're not all cognizant of the schedules, and we don't see a lot of the things before they happen, but certainly communicating to the president of the PTA of that individual school that many of the Jewish members of the community are not going to be able to attend that night, and it may have been wiser to in the future certainly to reschedule that event for another night where everybody can have access and attend. That would be my response to those three things. And I wouldn't underestimate the teacher. I would communicate.
Well, it wasn't an isolated incident.
Okay, well, but still, if I wouldn't underestimate the teacher, and I would communicate to the teacher the fact that Jewish holidays begin at sunset, the day before it appears on the calendar, and that's the way it is, so that in the future, hopefully, she'll integrate that information and won't, communicate misinformation to anyone. Yes.
I lived it. I was not invisible in the general community and the Jewish education community, and I have two kids who both had to deal with Abba being everywhere, speaking out in public, and having eyes and ears all over. It was very difficult. And I think you have to separate those roles and talk about the role as parent-teacher to them, and they are your first priority, and you will advise them when there is an opportunity, and you can talk over whether they want you to be there or not, and you may, knowing that it comes from an honest, good place, say, you know what, maybe we'll find somebody else, but I am still your prime teacher. I can't leave that responsibility. Teaching others, sometimes I can come in, and I hope you're proud that we are people who know what we're talking about for ourselves, and we'd love to share that just to explain it. But your kids, if you trust them, they may dictate what that response would be in public, because you don't get over that. It's very, very difficult, I know. I would say that, again, there are both clergy, paraprofessionals, there are people who take classes here who are very skilled. You have teachers who you may be able to access for that. And if not, through JCRC, maybe we could talk about who's available to do some of these things and what kind of scripts will take the spotlight away from this Jewish kid to here's a Jewish idea that actually is shared by Islam, Christianity, other groups, and have that universal phrasing. It's scripts for your kids as well.
Yeah, I'd like to confirm. So we already have a page on our website, jcouncil.org/schools.
Yeah, my experience with the particular history of religion courses, or just history courses in general, is that the textbooks sort of dictate what nomenclature is used, and that teachers take their cue from the textbooks. And so I think the predominant mode in our society is BC and AD. However, I mean, if the information comes from a student that there are other terms that express the same ideas as far as chronology and time, that those are certainly relevant. And you know, for a teacher, I think it would be a questionable and a teachable moment to say to the teacher, you know, there are books that use other nomenclature. You know, I'm not sure you're curricularly going to change most of the nomenclature in the textbooks or the way most history teachers approach it. But I think it's a teachable moment. That would be my response.
There's a, first of all, and Andrew pointed it out, they do correlate, meaning the common era starts at the year 0 because that's what we're referencing. We don't feel comfortable saying the year of our Lord, Anno Domini. But there are some people who use AM, Anno Mundi, meaning you mark things by important personalities or ideas. That's true. And for a general population where Jesus was that change in the world, I can understand that. We happen to have a calendar where it's 5773. What does that mean? AM. Because for us, the year of when humanity was created and that whole concept of history, that's how we mark our calendar. Giving the rationale, not just the differences, will let somebody hear, understand what it is, but reference it differently for themselves. So more information, more explanation, the better people will be.
We have such a lively conversation, and we know you have tons of questions, but we do need to move on. We want to thank all of our speakers